if you are on this divorce or separation journey, you might be encountering some challenges about co-parenting. And as a divorce coach, this is one of the biggest challenges I've seen in the whole process is the impact on our children of our divorce. Regardless of their age, even adult children, they are impacted. And if you have been going through the divorce and then you're thinking about blending a family, you're likely getting into the territory of step parenting, which is also very challenging in different ways. That's why we have Colette here today to talk about all of these topics on co-parenting during and post-divorce with us. Welcome, Colette.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to be here.
Colette is the owner of Fairway Divorce Resolution in Waterloo, which has been in business for more than 10 years. Colette is a very experienced mediator herself and a resolution expert. She specializes in family-centered conflict resolution. She has helped guide hundreds of couples to a fair conclusion of their separation while helping preserve their family relationships, which is so key. I'm super excited to have you on the show, Colette. I know it's tough. It's a tough time for everyone. If we look at the economic background, it has been tough for a couple of years, actually, with COVID and now the impact of COVID. It's extremely hard to go through a divorce or separation during this time. I wonder if you can talk about what are some of the biggest co-parenting challenges people facing during divorce.
Well, thanks, Lisa. And I think I wanted to start by, I think it's important to acknowledge that nobody gets married expecting or moves in with a partner expecting that a separation is going to happen. And relationships, marriages come with expectations and promises. And the journey to separation is not an overnight decision. It's often a very, very long process, and it can be filled with such a mixed bag of emotions. Trying to separate the relationship from the parenting responsibility, probably the hardest thing to do because you're dealing with your own feelings about separation. And then when you have kids, let's face it, you can get divorced, but you will be forever connected to this person. So there's no magic answer, but I'm glad that we're having this conversation today because I think educating yourself on what are some strategies that work and how to just take some time to really reflect on what are my goals and values around co-parenting? Really, really important. So I really wanted to take a second. It's brave of your listeners to be journeying through this because society wants us to hate each other. Society wants to feed on the drama of this divorce and separation. And here you have these 1, 2, or 3 little people who love both parents and who actually have no interest in really, they just want to be kids. They just want to be kids. So how do you separate that? So really, really important to acknowledge and congratulate people for taking the time to listen and educate themselves on this challenging journey. So what are some of the biggest challenges, Lisa? Well, I would say it depends on what the pressure point was in the marriage. A lot of times, whatever the couple was dealing with when they were together it's not going to go away. You think, I'm going to divorce this person, I'm going to be rid of them forever. Those pressure points, whether it's communication styles, whether it's different styles of parenting, flexible, experiential parenting versus structured parenting. Those we see play out in separation. Micromanaging your ex because one parent maybe did take the lead on the childcare because they may be more inclined or more interested, but really we divide roles in a marriage. So what happens is somebody's cutting the grass and somebody's reading the bedtime story. And by nature, when you're separating and you're giving up time, whoever perceived themselves as sort of the primary, I don't like to use that kind of language, but the on point for some of that day to day, managing your expectations on what you can influence and what you can't, big topic that we work through.
I really love your point is that we're thinking about what are we separating, right? In a divorce or separation journey. So all of our old patterns and everything doesn't just get resolved because you have a piece of divorce paper. They're still lingering there. So be mindful of that and more reason to get extra resources and learning about how to do it more intentionally rather than just thinking, oh, problem fixed, now we're divorced.
Yeah.
If anything, it's the opposite. Now you're at two households right? Being consistent, alignment is even harder. So I love that you give us this reality check. It's the residue.
You have to manage your expectations for sure. And as I said before, the pressure points that were there before, they're just going to play out differently now. And so you have to decide how you're going to navigate that.
I love that the pressure point is like a high pressure hook. It's like boom if we don't manage it well. So great. That's a great start. So I've got into contact with a lot of people that they're considering, right? I'm not saying you should or should not. And parenting, how to parent, the impact on their children is a big factor for them to make that decision to whether divorce or not. So can you share some common do's and don'ts for co-parenting effectively right before the start, or even when they're thinking about going through this journey? Maybe they realize that themselves and their partner are not a good match, but they still wanted to maintain the intact of parenting as a team.
So I think whether you're separating or not, you got to have a good plan. You need to have a good plan to be able to have the conversation around what do we need to be on the same page about? What is important to our kids? What's important to us? I think predictability for younger children, and there's lots of good resources around how to navigate separation and divorce, or even just co-parenting in the house together. But there's some age specific and age appropriate for those people who are actually separating. Lots of people throw out, 50-50, and they think the only way to get 50-50 is a week on, a week off. While a good mediator is going to guide you through, listen, you've got a 4 and a 6-year-old. Let's talk about some alternate ways to share time that is equal, but not such long gaps in time between two households, because that's developmentally not the most appropriate schedule for young children. So I think having a good plan is really important. Having a communication plan. When is it appropriate to text each other? Under what situation? When should we use email? And when should we be in person? And I like those pillars because, hey, I'm running 5 minutes late. That's an easy text thing. Johnny's failing grade 9 math. Maybe not a text message thing. Maybe that's we should go for coffee and discuss whether we're going to talk about a tutor or what's going to happen. Hey, I need to make a switch next month. My cousin is having an event and I'd like to attend. Maybe that's an email. So really thinking about what's your communication plan. We've gotten so comfortable with texting, and while it's efficient, people don't always receive messages in the way they were intended. And we've seen lots of times where situations will explode because someone misinterpreted.
Which will trigger more conflicts down the road, which is not what you need or want during this time. I think goes back to your previous point that we have certain patterns that were carried through from when we were married. So this is a great time to reestablish some boundaries, and including communication needs. Sometimes if we don't know, we don't assume. Just checking with your spouse, like, is it okay if I text you if it's a 5 minutes short conversation? I'll write you an email, or we can talk when we meet each other. So here's some great guidelines.
I think it's about planning because the relationship is changing. It's ending in some respect, but it's not really ending if you have children. Because parenting is a lifetime job. I mean, the bulk of the work ends at 18, but it's still a lifetime job. So being able to actually plan what our communication approach is going to look like. I mean, there's so many resources, My Family Wizard, and for some of the logistical pieces and managing finances through separation, lots of great resources for people to use to avoid having to. So one of the big things is don't have an important discussion in the hallway when you're picking up and dropping off the kids. The biggest thing, no matter what you're facing, is you want to insulate your children from the conflict or even from the discussion. It's not always conflict, but suppose you've got a preteen who's asking if she can go to a Halloween party this weekend. And one parent's like, I'm not sure about the friend who's hosting. I've heard some things from other mothers. I'm just not sure. And one parent's like, yeah, sounds good to me. Here's a perfect example where you need to be aligned before you communicate to your child what the answer is and what the parameters are. Otherwise, if one parent says, it's okay with me as long as your mom or dad says it's okay, other parent says, no, I'm not comfortable. I've heard some things. It hasn't been. Now they're put in the bad guy seat because the teenager's like, well, dad said I could, or mom said I could.
Yeah.
Why won't you let me go? So be on the same page, have a communication plan, and make sure that whatever you're doing from a scheduling perspective, that you consider the ages of your kids, and don't ask them with the inquiry of, did you have fun at your mom's? And what did you do?
Yeah.
And sort of like
Yes.
crying as they're leaving. And now the kids are feeling guilty because they don't want to, they end up telling their teachers. I was a teacher for 20 years before I started this work.
Yeah.
The guilt that they feel when they have a good time, or parents sabotaging a trip to Florida, like, don't go there because they'll just end up resenting you anyway in the future.
I love that. The general principle, I think, it's really shield our children from whatever conflict you may have with your spouse. One, and then protect them, like you said. They just want to be kids, whatever age they are. They might be 4, they might be 14, they might be 40. And, as a 40-year-old, they might not want to get into the drama of dad and mom. They just want to be your child. That's one. And two, I think it's key is that if you want a healthy co-parenting relationship, you yourself have to show up as a parent and an adult. And whenever your inner child shows up, want to throw a tantrum at your ex or anything, you got to be really aware to show up as a real adult. I think that's key as well.
I love that, Lisa, because listen, you know what each other's buttons are as a couple. So don't go there. If you know there's a button, don't go there. Find an alternate way to deal with it. Get some professional help. Like, think through. But we sometimes just get, as you say, the inner child gets a hold of us and our ego gets in the way. And in the same way that you shield your kids from violence in the world, or you make decisions as a family of what kind of exposure they're going to have to world events, social media, such and such. This is no different.
Yeah. Violence. And it could be verbal violence or anything. Yeah. So I think our point here is manage your emotions, get help and support. And especially when your ex-spouse is not aligned. And then as much as possible, show up as an adult in this new dynamic. We kind of talked a little bit about the challenge is that at this time, whether it's during divorce or post-divorce, emotions are very high. How can, as a divorced parent in the co-parenting journey, how do we make sure our children's well-being is taken care of when maybe ourselves are going through a lot of turmoil emotionally, and the other side as well, and especially if we are in the negotiation processing mediation. Right? We're talking about finances and here's this, how do we divide assets, You have all the emotions and feeling is unfair, likely. So how do we manage that and ensure our children's well-being is considered?
Well, and certainly the word compartmentalize can be really helpful. I had a client once tell me they would come back every year to recalculate child support. And every year I would see them, it would become easier and easier. And I was like, they're getting along way better than they were 5 years ago. So I asked them, well, what's the secret? Like, what is it that poor children, so they were going to be in this game for a long time. And he said, well, here's the thing. Now, this is before lots of cell phones. And I mean, there were cell phones, but he said, I keep a picture of my kids in my wallet. And whenever I'm going to send her a message, before I send the message, I look at the picture of my kid. And I take a second. I think sometimes space in the gap between I have a feeling, this is, and certainly introspective, this is a button that's being pushed before I respond. Emotional intelligence says, know yourself, know how you come across before you respond. Somebody else said you got to put your relationship in the closet when you're co-parenting. It's irrelevant to the job of co-parenting. Sometimes I tell people, before you hit send, ask yourself 4 questions. If you can't answer yes to all 4, think again. Is what I'm about to say true?
Yeah.
Is what I'm about to say necessary? Yeah. Is what I'm about to say going to be helpful? And will it matter in a year from now?
I love it. This is Byron Katie's work. It's the key questions very similar. Because once you ask the second question, is it absolutely true? You start to really think like, maybe I'm making up some stories in my mind. You start to do some introspective work. And then you realize I'm triggered is really about me, not about the other person. And then you can really take a step back. I love the example you shared as well. This is a very self-conscious intentional parent and who will make great decisions. And back to the point, ultimately, co-parents who succeed in co-parenting a different household is because they absolutely prioritize their children.
It's their job.
That's it.
It's your job. It's your job to, in the same way, don't think for a minute they don't reflect and recall on their childhood. It's your job to provide them not just with education and the basics of life, but also role modeling healthy relationships, role modeling when you have a difficult situation. Because I know you're going to say, oh, you don't know my ex. And I get it. I get it. You don't know she's a he. Totally get that. That is tougher. It's like walking on eggshells. It's like, but you know what has, and if you don't know what has worked in the past, get some help to sort out what are some different, same old strategy is not going to result in a more peaceful environment. You know, what you're about to say might be true. Well, he's such a, she's such, will it be necessary? Do you think that person's actually going to benefit from what you're about to say? And most importantly, is this going to help the situation? It's not.
Exactly. Is it going to achieve what you want to achieve, or will it actually backfire? So, and especially now, the good thing about separating, I'm not advocating for it or divorcing, is that you will have your own space, right? Whether it's mental, actually also physical. You can take a step back. It's easier, like you said.
Yeah, there's very few text messages that have to be answered in the moment.
Or even the
a lot
phone
of
call,
our
you can
clients
say,
will have a code word. We ask them to choose a code word. It's often the family pet, because that's often, if they have a pet, everybody sort of smiles when they think about Rusty or whatever the pet is. They say, if either one of you texts or says the code word, that's permission to immediately end the conversation. Because sometimes people will say, well, we started a conversation, it was going well, we were having good flow, then we hit a hiccup and it spiraled. Okay, well, catch the spiral as soon as it's happening. Throw that code word down and say, let's come back to this later because we don't have to answer it right. I'm going to call Rusty right now, Lisa, and I'll talk to you later. That's like permission to say I'm about to hang up. Or in the case of texting, I'm done this conversation. Because when it's not going anywhere, it just deteriorates the relationship.
Yeah.
Strategy.
What's the point?
Right?
Yeah. And ultimately, the children will get hurt. And you talked about at the very beginning, you said, what are your goals? What are your values? So before entering into this plan or communication or anything, the person yourself needs to get really clear. What do you want for your children, right? What are your core values? Are you someone who's going to dump everything and complain and about the other side to your children? Are you going to be this asking your children to be the spy and tell you what's happening on the other side? And
that doesn't align with your values. Exactly.
Exactly.
And when we start a parenting meeting with our clients, we start with, tell us about your kids, but then also, what is most important to you as parents? What is it that you want for your children? And we write it down on the chart paper or on a screen if we're on Zoom, so that when they hit a hiccup of you never or always, and how does that align with what you talked about earlier as your goal for your children to be compassionate or care about the environment or whatever it is that they just value sports or whatever it is that you've described. And it's kind of like your own internal checkpoint to say, actually, that does not align with what we said was important.
Exactly. Alignment, I think, as we say now, is checking with yourself. It's first step, and then you can go approach the other side. But we all know, Colette, you've probably seen it a lot, and I've seen it a lot, is that what we talked about, the strategy or the style, still kind of, we have the foundation is that the other side can meet you or have this similar intention, right? Or keeping the children well and happy is their top priority. And sometimes through this journey, we might get lost of ourselves, right? We might not be the best.
Absolutely. And, I think we talked about try not to micromanage. If you're going to have an expectations conversation and you're thinking about consistency of routines and discipline as an example. Okay, so get on the same page about the big pillars. Those are important. But kids actually can adjust to two different homes. You think about when you were young, if you went to this grandparent's house, you could have your snack on the couch and everything was all as well, and it was a bit more liberal. The other grandparents, maybe they had the plastic thing on the couch or you had to sit on the floor to have your snack. they'll easily adapt to some of those smaller differences, if you will. So it's about managing your expectations around that so that it's consistent when it comes to big pillars like nutrition and bedtime and screen time. Those are big pillars, but also letting go. And it's hard because when you don't have your kids, whether it's half the time or whatever the schedule ends up looking like, you lose a little bit of control over, are they going to make their bed in the way that I think they should make their bed? Or are they going to do their, and you have to release some of that because kids do adjust and are able to compartmentalize. Oh, this is how we do things at dad's house. This is how we do things at mom's house. This is how we do things at grandma's house. They're smarter than we think.
Exactly. Definitely. You talked about consistency. How can parents maintain consistency in routines and even discipline? So it's okay to watch TV after 9 p.m. at dad's house. But what if at mom's house, mom say absolutely no screen time after 9 p.m.?
And I think that's where a good mediator can help the parties have a discussion. And first and foremost, where are we aligned? Where are we not aligned? And how can we come to a space where we both feel okay about? Sometimes it's meet in the middle and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's about ensuring that each of you hears the why behind the concern. So if a child is having lots of nightmares and they think it might be because of the pre-bedtime screen time, could they try something different for a month and see if it has an effect? But sometimes the parties get into this power struggle, but a neutral third party who's not vested into the relation, you're just trying to control everything. So, I mean, I've heard it all, right? And it's like, okay, let's take a step back and look at what's behind the question, what's behind the concern. And then a big thing with toddlers is eating. And so they don't always want to eat. And then there's a concern about, is the child developing and how are we going to get on the same page about this? And so it's about having a space where you can have the conversation. Let's forget about who's right or wrong. Let's put that aside and say, what's going to be most effective? Of course, we're going to lean into the research. I remember a family having a discussion about Wonderland and thinking, well, the comfort level of one parent around some of the rides was very different. The circle of comfort was very broad for one parent and the other one not so. And so they had to actually get down and into the details, into the weeds with me about, okay, well, what's the first criteria that's going to disqualify is the height of the child, because that mechanism is put in place, right? So then they were able to say, oh, there's no negotiating at the end, and they're able to drill down what criteria. Choosing a summer camp, another perfect example.
Yeah.
Very broad. Oh, that's a great place. I went there as a kid. Well, no, I want them to. Okay. So what are some of the things that you feel are important in a summer camp? Let's identify that. Trained lifeguards, cabin ratio, counselor ratio, whatever it is that they come up with. Then they can evaluate the choice against the criteria versus, I think this is best. No, I think this is best. And then it becomes a power struggle instead of objectively evaluating what's most. Driver training, been through that one. I want to see all of it, right?
Yeah. I love this point is that often, and this really apply across the board when we are going through the separation divorce journey on the legal front. When we get into conflict or disagreement, it's because ultimately it's really not about how we divide the house, how we divide parenting and which camp do we send our kids to. It's our ego saying, I want to prove to you that I'm right. Ultimately, that's that power struggle. I know I'm right. And we're trying to find different ways to show and prove we're right, because ultimately it's that we didn't feel seen and heard in our marriage, and we wanted to be seen and heard. And
it's a control. It's a way to get it's a way to get back control. And barring safety concerns, which we're going to put over here and say that absolutely is the place for court. Do you really want a judge to decide? Like, they don't know the nuances. But here's the thing about parenting is that you come into a relationship, you have a child, you're bringing your beliefs, your history, how you were raised to the table, but so is the other person. So whether you're, I do have another business aside when I have more time is how to coach people, how to enter into a relationship to avoid the breakup, because we plan the wedding. It takes us 1.5 years, 2 years to plan the wedding. Nobody's planning the marriage. We need to plan the marriage. right?
So true. I can't. Hallelujah. We don't learn how to do relationship, let alone marriage. Everything we learned is from likely our parents, right? And how they parented, the dynamic between them in their partnership. So much to learn, and just to be aware that what's the point of arguing who is right, who is wrong, if your children are hurt and you see they're impacted negatively ultimately. Right.
Yeah,
So if you,
the greatest myth is that kids from separated families will have a harder time in life. What
yeah,
is true is kids from high conflict separations will have a harder time in life.
yeah,
That's the difference.
absolutely. Yeah, it's because we put something we might think we're putting them as priority, but our behavior and action are not aligned into that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and so important, as we mentioned, and my clients are the same, right? She did this, she said that. Can you believe this? They did that. And we have to see that, yes, in this very high conflict journey of divorcing, the other party, whatever they did, may be perceived or maybe outrageously not only undermining or competing with your parenting style, but sometimes sabotaging as well. What are some suggestions for people in
Yeah,
that kind of
and I think,
dynamic?
Lisa, it's a continuum, right? So certainly on the one end, really amicable, on the same page. On the other end, could be personality disorders, could be mental health issues, could be lots of different variables that are leading to that sabotage behavior. And sometimes as mediators, as we're working with people, we talk about parallel parenting. So the further on the conflict scale you are, the less crossover you want to build into the plans to minimize, and the more clarity you want in the plan to minimize the gray areas of, and the more amicable people are, the more flexible they can be. Sometimes you need that professional help to know, well, where do we fit on that continuum? Because to say, well, we're gonna discuss long weekends every year so that we share them equally is not gonna work if you have really poor communication, and there's always let's specify it now. So how do you avoid, or how do you deal with competition and undermining? Well, I would say, first of all, kids are pretty intuitive, so they're going to pick that up right away. So now they're going to start to hold back what they say in each house. So that was, like I said, I was a teacher for 20 years. I read a lot of 12 and 13-year-old journals. So they tell their teachers a lot of things that they may not share with their parents. And I do have people say, I can't afford, I can't compete. Look at the video system and this. And so when people say that and they worry about the competitive and undermining, I ask a question. Lisa, when you were 11 years old, do you remember what you got for Christmas? Specifically when you were 11 years old? I can't answer that.
Yeah.
But if I say, what's your fondest memories you have of your grandmother? You might say, oh, the smell of her blah, blah, blah cooking, or she would play games with us, or she would read to us, or because what resonates and what forms memories are emotional responses to those events. And that doesn't have to cost money. So in the context of financial competition between houses, children will remember moments and timeline moments, and those often have very little to do with money.
Yeah, it's the energy you invest in this, and also the experience as parents we're trying to create for our children that stay for a long time. I love that. How about parents who are in the, for lack of a better word, fight for time with their children? That's tough. And a lot of people, you've seen it, I've seen it, spend time to just, go to the court system. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because sometimes you feel stuck, you have to go there, and just fighting for that time.
And I would say that's probably the least favorite element of our job, because it's such a, let's put the high conflict safety, whether it's physical or emotional safety, let's put those over there and say those do need parenting coordinators and voice of the children and all of that. So let's just not talk about that, but more sort of the garden variety of, oh, I don't want to have to share so much time. They're my children, and I don't want to have to ask you for time. And, nobody has to prove to the other. I had a lawyer once tell me this. My client doesn't have to prove to their spouse that it's not a license that the other party gets to grant yes or no. My perspective is often, let's find out what's behind the curtain. Because if you have a concern about bedtime or routines or yelling in the house or whatever. Whether you have 50-50 parenting or not, you're still going to have that same problem.
Mm.
You can't get rid of the concern by having full people who throw that full custody of the child, because most parents have parenting time.
Yeah.
Alternate weekends, 2 evenings a week, minimum, right? Somewhere between alternate weekends and 50-50 is what has to get worked out. So once you start to break that down and go, okay, well, if we're going to share every other weekend and now 2 evenings a week from 5 to 9 p.m., are they going to sleep over or not sleep over? That's really the only difference. Of course, if the routines of homework are a problem, then let's put that on the table and talk about it. I often do an exercise. What does it look like to have shared parenting? And if my clients live together, I'm going to encourage them to actually practice while they're in the house together. Because some people have to stay in the house together while they're working the financial settlement out.
Yes.
So they're going to
In-house
practice.
separation. Yeah.
They're going to practice. What does it mean to have 50-50? Well, it means you're doing tuck-in, you're doing a load of laundry, you're making the lunches, you're getting them up in the morning, you're getting them to school. That's what it looks like, because that's what it's going to look like when you're in different houses. And sometimes people will practice that. I remember this a couple of years ago, they gave me permission to talk about their situation, but it was going to be a hard no on shared parenting. Like, I didn't think Mrs. Client was going to get there. And I didn't have an agenda. I was just like, whoa, this is... So we did the trial run in the house because they knew they were going to sell their house and they wanted to wait till they had a separation agreement. Smart idea before, because they didn't know who was going to go where, but so they practiced. And about a month in, she came back and it was clear, like, this is what it looks like to do shared parenting. One of the pressure points was he didn't help around the house. That's part of it.
Very common.
So,
very common. Yes.
So came back to it. She was having a financial meeting with me and she said, oh my goodness, I can actually work late 2 nights a week because I know he has the kids. I signed up for that yoga class I never got to do, and he's actually doing the thing. And if he had done that when we were together, and I'm not picking on guys, because it could, it's not about...
It could be reverse as well. Yeah.
And sometimes people come to me and go, I like, you know what? This is too much for me. My career is just way too, the shift work, it's too much. So let's talk about a different schedule. So it's an opportunity to practice. Gives your kids a chance to get used to fighting for time. It's a bit of a lose-lose, honestly. I had an elementary school teacher once just like, overnights during the school, that's just not going to... So they did a hybrid. So during the school year, the kids did go see the other parent, but came back at night. But in the summer, they did 50-50 because pressure was the routine before school. That was the pressure point. So if you can identify what the pressure, you're just trying to take my kids away from me. Of course, a good mediator is going to probe and find out what is behind the curtain.
Yeah, I love that. Every situation is different. I think that's really, we don't want to end up in court because it's like someone you don't know who make that judgment, and working with them through mediation that will give you a lot of flexibility. I really, really love what you said, the practice run. So I have people who are considering, but nobody is 100% sure. Like maybe
you don't know what you're signing up for. Yeah,
exactly. 100% sure, like this is definitely, I mean, they're not even sure if this is absolutely, they want the divorce, right? And they were like, oh, if he would do that, she would do that, they might consider continue. I think that would be really worth exploring. Even if you're in that phase of thinking, maybe have a conversation with your partner, right? And if the marriage hasn't been good for a long time, it's not news for the other party as well. Just test it out. Right? If we separate our household, can you actually handle the 50% time? If you're someone who haven't really packed the kids' lunch or take them to school or after.
That doesn't mean that you can't. It's just something that the reality, Lisa, when people separate, everybody's got a learning curve.
Yep.
The person who didn't do the finance has to learn to do the finance. The person who didn't do the menu planning, I don't know too many people who sit down and do 100% of everything together in a relationship. There's no time. You divide and conquer the jobs. And it's just, I think when it comes to kids, if one parent did do more of the heavy lifting, the other parent can either, and again, the more conflict there is, the more this is exacerbated, can feel like they're losing control, or that somehow there's a leverage of even the Divorce Act getting away from this whole notion of what are the children used to. I mean, yes, to some degree you have to manage that, especially for young children, of course, but it doesn't mean the other parent can't So you have to get what's behind the curtain. And it's hard to separate. We talked about emotion. It's hard to separate emotion of the relationship with the role of co-parents. But I hope and tell people, if you sabotage your ex deliberately in front of your children or criticize them, when you're 80 or 85, your kids are picking your nursing home. So what do you want to instill in them?
Yeah.
I don't want them
Yes.
thinking it's not
Yeah.
like respect.
Yes. And also, I tell my clients that never sabotage your other parent no matter what, and never say any bad word in front of your kids. You know why? Because mom or dad is part of your kids. When you say
Yep.
something about dad or mom who are not good, who are terrible, it stays with your kids as well. It's part of their core. So
Mhm.
don't do that. No matter how angry or
Yep.
unfair
And
you feel.
they will resent you. And really
Yes.
the focus, especially if a child is having difficulties communicating with a parent and, oh yeah, well, your mother was always, that's not helping the child. It's like, think
Yeah.
about it this way. If your kid had a part-time job and they had a difficult boss wherever they're working, as a parent, you're going to coach them through how to communicate with their employer,
Yeah.
what they're struggling with. Like, I'm really finding it's, what you're not, well, your boss just quit that job, right?
Yeah.
How you're
Yes.
not teaching your child a life skill that they need. So it's an opportunity to empower your kids to learn how to navigate difficult situations, whether it's the co-parent, whether it's, a teacher they don't like, they're just going to
Yeah.
quit.
Yeah.
So
Great point. It's that when you're there for your kids through this difficult conversation or difficult transition, you're setting them for success for their future intimate relationship as well. Because like you said, you're role modeling how to handling these challenging situations. It's huge, and you will reap the benefits
yeah,
years later. And when you manage yourself, so come back to that. But if you can have a practice run, whether you're in-house separation or you're considering, you can have that open conversation with your spouse and soon to be ex-spouse, do that, because it will give yourself understanding of your own capacity and also the other side. So I think that's a great suggestion.
I
Continue
think
to.
that when people are in the house together, they can do some informal nesting. And nesting is where they might take turns on weekends, being the parent on duty with
Yeah.
the kids. And the other parent may go to a friend's it gives the parties space and grace. It gives the kids space and grace, but they're still living in the same house. But it's just kind of giving that little bit of breathing room and then practicing. Like, if you've got a 3-year-old who only got tucked in by parent A because parent B was dealing with the 5-year-old, and
Yeah.
that's just how they did it, there's some cross training for the kids too that needs to happen,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, and it would just ease into the transition when they actually separate. So I
yeah,
love that advice. If we go on a job, we practice, right? We have a 3 months of probation. Like, really, why shouldn't we do this here? So I want to transition it into a different phase. You know, if you are divorced and you may be considering entering into another relationship, and it's very common to get into a new role as a step parent, you know, whether it's from whoever's side, or as we blend family. This is a big step. I see a lot of people underestimate how much work and planning and intention we need to set into this, especially when both sides of the family are from divorced family, right? Both sides of the kids are from divorced family. And I have clients who've been through their second divorce, right? So it's clearly very common. When is a good time to introduce the new partner to the kids? I know a lot of people do have that concern. And how can we make sure our kids are well during this transition?
just as I said earlier, I don't think there's a magic answer as to this is 6 months, 8 months. One of the things that we talk about is allowing a bit of space between the separation of the parents. If they haven't even got their separation agreement, the move hasn't happened yet. Like, if you're in a new relationship, that's great. We coach our clients, keep that quiet. Let the kids adjust to the 2 home situation first, whatever that looks like. Sometimes what can be really helpful is distinguishing between I'm dating someone and I'm in a relationship with someone. Because the research shows that kids don't want to know you're going on a date. If you're on a dating app, and you know what, that's moving on is a healthy part of the transition. So it isn't about that. But they don't put them in the role of best friend, especially preteens or teenagers, right? You still got to create some of that separation. So if you think about if you were to identify this individual as I'm in a relationship with this person versus I am dating this person, if you're in the I am dating this person bucket, maybe not a great idea, because if it doesn't work out, kids get attached very quickly and they don't
Yeah.
really need to know. And teenagers don't want to know their parents dating. They just,
Because
they
they
don't,
might be dating themselves. They were like, yes, my
they don't want to.
parents are
And
dating. Yeah.
statistically, both parties will repartner within 3 to 5 years. 80% of people are going to have a new partner. So we come back to the concept of respect for one another can be, hey, John, I've been dating someone for 9 months now. I just want to give you the heads up. I'm going to be introducing the kids to, some people even go so far as having the other parent meet the new person before the kids. I mean,
Yeah.
that's an individual
I love
decision.
that.
It's all about how amicable you are. And I mean, I know people who used to get in the van together, mom and her partner and dad and his new wife and the kid, and they'd go to hockey because gas was so expensive. Everybody's going to the tournament together. I mean, that's maybe an extreme amicable situation, but who says it has to be acrimonious, right?
Yes, yes. And I love this so much, and a lot of my clients and a lot of my friends too, like I see going through divorce and too quickly they're jumping into a new relationship. And again, here's the key that divorce is a huge transition, huge, probably one of the biggest transition in our lifetime. And take some time for yourself to really find who you are, right? Like we talked about, what are your values? And now you're single again. What are you trying to achieve career-wise, also personal-wise, right? What kind of parents do you want to become? So get a little bit of clarity on that front will help you in a long, long way, because let's face it. Yeah. Divorce is a traumatic.
We are two good people who are just not good together. But if you don't do the work, and I know this is a whole other topic we can talk about, but if you don't do the work to understand what did you contribute, because it's very easy, it's involved and he's this, and, you don't know my ex and she, whatever it was, like there's an internal opportunity to reflect on, well, what is it that I contributed to this relationship? It doesn't have to be about fault or blame.
Yeah. Because once you get back on the dating app, and trust me, because I'm in this journey, is that you will be triggered and you'll be like, oh my God, why am I feeling this way? It's terrible, right? It's not about sunshine and rainbow. So take some time to really reflect on yourself, heal yourself, and so that the chance of having a healthier relationship will be higher. And also be extremely considerate before you introduce someone into the kid's life. They're so sensitive, and kids pick up anything and vulnerable, regardless of what the age they are. So just really checking with yourself many times. Don't rush that decision.
And if your ex is the first one to repartner, watch yourself, because I think the number one criteria the lens through which you want to look at this other person is, how do they treat my kids and how do my kids feel in their presence? And if the kids have a good time, are treated with kindness and respect, how you feel about your ex's new person, just think about the lens through which you want to look at that situation, because it's going to give them permission. Again, permission to be kids. If your kids like their stepmom, isn't that better? You're always going to be their mom. You're always going to be their dad. Like, that's not going to change. It doesn't have to be a competition. And kids have the capacity to expand their love for different, and they evaluate. That's what I love about kids. They're so authentic. It's very easy for them. How do you treat me and how do you make me feel?
Yeah.
Whether it's a teacher, a coach, a friend, a potential step parent, a step sibling, that's the lens through which they evaluate. And they have less ego around that stuff than grown-ups do.
Yeah. And also, I love your emphasis on neutrality. Approach this with a neutral attitude, and to really, again, is it the best for my kids? And putting our emotions about that person, their relationship, or maybe some jealousy come from our ego on the back burner. And if they rush into a relationship too quickly, more reason for you to do the work to heal yourself. It's not a competition of who gets into a new relationship.
No, absolutely not.
It's a trophy or something. Thank you for that. I think step parenting, blended family, that can be almost another episode. It's something that
100%.
really we don't talk we don't talk enough about it because we just think, oh, two people fall in love. And then, of course, everything is going to work. It's a lot of challenges. And I have a lot of respect for people who blended family and really consider everyone in that situation intentionally. I want to just have my last question, which is, as we are getting closer to the holiday season, I know it can be really hard for families, especially they're newly separated, or still haven't really established their own traditional routine. So any suggestions for handling big holidays like this? Maybe they're still fighting over time or sleepover or not, to make sure that our kids have a positive experience, and yourself too.
I think that having a clear plan on how you're going to share the holidays. Lots of people still celebrate together. That's awesome. But have a backup plan in the event that you don't in the future. It's not easy. And I'm going to use Christmas as an example because that's the busiest day, and lawyers tell us the busiest day in family court is the Friday before Christmas because people don't have their parenting arrangements figured out.
Yeah.
School is out now, and so we always make sure people have a plan. But it's hard to imagine dividing time. Like the 25th in the morning as an example, or whatever traditional celebrations your family participated in are going to probably need to change or shift. And depending on the holiday itself, the day itself can be quite significant, and you can't cut the child in half. So you got to figure out, okay, are we going to alternate years, or am I the kind of person who maybe is less sentimental about that? I know I've got to establish a new routine. You know what? Is this something that I can work with, and just fair's not always equal?
Yeah.
So
yes,
you have to decide, you know what, this is really important because extended family, they always get together on night or whatever it is that they're doing. My family lives 2,000 miles away. I don't need to take my children away from what they know as extended family time. I want some time for sure. We have to figure that out, but I'm prepared to release that because again, kids are going to remember. Well, let me ask you this. For the traditional Canadian Christmas, would you want to eat 4 turkey dinners over the course of 2.5 days? I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, you would. Please, not turkey. So, is there an opportunity to do something else?
Yeah, I love that, to really step back and to reevaluate. I also love your example earlier, is what will your kids remember? What will your kids remember?
The beach party Christmas Eve, where we turned up the heat and we had a beach party with fruit fondue, and that's what they're going to remember.
Yeah.
Right?
And does it matter it has to happen in the morning of the 25th, right? Is it okay if the 27th they wouldn't remember? So key to think about. And also another thing I see people, they see if they keep retrieving, compromising, they consider is as a failure. Really just think about back to your goals and values. What are the absolutely things you wanted to insist on? What are some things, you just be like, oh, okay. No, not a big deal. So only you can decide, you, the individual,
100%.
of course.
Do I want to be right, or do I want to be happy? Does it have to be equal, or do I want peace?
Absolutely. I think for all the clients I talked to, ultimately they want peace and contentment. Now we all want that. And sometimes we have to decide to letting go, because divorce is a journey of detachment with all the dreams and all the relationship we had. And that's a bigger topic.
And here's the thing, last thing I want to leave people with. You have your kids for 18 years as your dependent children. Then you have another 50 or so years with them as adults. So this is temporary.
Yeah. Long-term view. Absolutely. We talk a lot about long-term view. And even when the kids hit, they have the decision, right, to who to go, whatever. So more reason for you, regardless of how hard it is right now, it seems to be that consistent parent, because consistency will get you a much longer way. I so appreciate you saying that, but I do want to ask, is there any other piece of advice you want to bring to people? Anything else I didn't ask that you really want to emphasize in the journey of co-parenting?
Just know that it takes practice. It also takes 2 to fight. You can choose to engage or find a workaround. And at the end of the day, the kids do not count hours. if I were to say, could you please tell me the percentage of time that you spent growing up one-on-one with your father versus your mother? You cannot answer that mathematically. Children deserve a healthy relationship with both parents. They deserve consistent time with both parents. We have that responsibility to do that. And just always ask yourself, keep that big picture in mind. And because when they're 18 and 19 and 25, and how you set that foundation for them is what's really the long game, is my relationship with my adult children.
Mm-hmm. And future generations relationship as well, because time does fly.
Yeah.
And
that's why sharing is here. I mean, I left the classroom, Lisa, and I went back to school 15 years ago because I saw so many kids over 20 years, kids whose parents were in amicable separations and kids whose parents weren't. And I could see the impact it was having on these 12-year-olds. And I remember the young girl who wrote in her journal, I don't know why I can't see my mom. I don't understand what's going on. And I invited her to lunch. She was new to the school, so I didn't really know much of the background. And so we had lunch together and we talked. And I said, how old were you when your parents separated? And she said, well, sometimes I just think it's all my fault. Everything is my fault.
Yeah.
And she started crying. And I thought, well, maybe she's not getting along with her mom, and that's why they decided. I didn't know the background. So I said, well, how old were you when your parents separated? And she looked at me and she said, I was 1. So for 11 years, this young lady carried the burden of her parents' conflict.
Yeah.
And as a result, blamed herself. And in that moment, I knew we have to do better. Finally, mediation is becoming the go-to alternative for people to say, look, it's emotional, it's difficult, there's legal stuff, let's put safety over here. Let's find someone who can guide and coach us, because a good mediator is going to be your coach, your guide, your facilitator, your negotiator if you're dealing with finances, but choosing a process that's going to actually set you up for success right from the beginning, instead of two sides. My lawyer said, and my lawyer said. How can you establish a healthy foundation once you've been through that? I had a lawyer say one time, the traditional system is like a hurricane.
Yeah. And trust me, lawyers hate that as well. Family law
It's not their
lawyers,
fault.
they don't like the system as well. They hate dealing with all this parenting fights, and nobody likes that, wants that. So nobody wants that. So more reason to have more conversation. So I thank you so much for sharing. And I just want to share my own experience a little bit. I'm not co-parenting. I'm my kids full time. But I just want to send a message to all of the parents too. During this time, it's very tough. It's okay, depending on how old your kids are. When you're not in a good emotional space, to tell your kids and to ask for some space from them. My kids are now 4 and 9. I've had times told them like, hey, mommy's not in a good space. I just really need some time by myself, and I just need 20 minutes, and then I can come and spend time with you. So it's okay to even take some time and step back, because sometimes it's your ex who sent a triggering email. You just need some time to digest. Maybe you need to take a walk or have a talk with your therapist. It's okay. We're not perfect. We're human. We will be triggered. We will be in a not so good state, and it's okay. It's the overall trajectory, how you parent, that matters, not one single event. So,
and I think, Lisa, most importantly, and as importantly, maybe that's a better way to say it, you are role modeling emotional intelligence for your kids. When you say, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, I need a minute, you're giving your kids the language to be able to also use in their future lives. As opposed to yelling at them and then apologizing because which we've all done, and it happens, and it's not about blame and shame.
Yes.
Right? But you're actually role modeling emotional intelligence when you say, I had a really busy day at work and I need a minute. Wow. That also says it's not you, it's not your fault. What can you do for 10 minutes while mommy just makes it?
Yeah. Thank you for that. And again, I'm not perfect. I've yelled, and there were bad days as well. So last night, my son insists on sleeping with me. I said, look, mommy had a really busy day. I'm not feeling very well. I don't think today is going to work, right? It's okay, like, for us to say that. And depending on how old your kids are, I mean, obviously use the language they can understand. so that they don't feel it's a rejection. But I just want to acknowledge how tough this journey is. It's okay to give yourself that grace and time and space. So thank you so much, Colette, for spending time with us to talk about such important topics, and we can easily talk for another hour. But before I let you go, where can people find you and where can people find your company as well?
So we are Fairway Divorce, and Fairway has offices across Canada, but we are the sort of Ontario office, and we're in Waterloo. Having said that, about 80% of our clients actually do what's called hybrid mediation, which means that they're either fully on Zoom or sometimes in person. We have 5 mediators now. I'm very excited about the team that we have in place, and they're here to help support and guide you. Relying on the internet for information when you're going through this is overwhelming. Relying on your friend at the water cooler for advice, sometimes they mean well, but everybody has their own experience. Having a neutral person to guide you and your ex through, gone are the days that it has to be a legal battle unless absolutely necessary. So take a minute, take that first step, come in, meet with the mediator, learn about how the process works, because everybody wants the same thing, to protect the children. And the best way we can do that is by ensuring that your relationship is as healthy as possible. And it's not therapy. And there is a process, because there's laws and there's child support and spousal support and all of that stuff. And traditionally, we used to think I have to immediately retain a lawyer. Not so much anymore, unless there's safety concerns. Mediation is a very, very effective way for people to move through, minimize the emotion, minimize the damage of the relationship, so they can move through and get on with their lives.
Absolutely. If you want some flexibility and to tailor to your own situation, also exploring some alternatives, mediation is definitely, I don't want to say better, but an amazing option. And I know, Colette, you have
I
people
think it's
who've
worth
been through
looking into.
Yeah.
Exactly. People owe it to themselves and their kids. And, 2 of our team are actually lawyers who left the legal profession to come and do mediation. And sometimes people are worried, oh, well, I need a lawyer, I don't know my rights. And a good mediator is going to educate you along the way so that you are making informed decisions as you navigate through.
Awesome. Thanks again, Colette. You can find her service and company by searching Fairway Divorce, and we will also add all the contact information and website. And thanks again, Colette, for joining us today. And we'll see you next time.
Take care, Lisa.